Anyone's worst fear would be to get a phone call and be told that someone they love has passed away. Losing a loved one is a tragic and heartbreaking ordeal. But there's something about that special person being murdered that just makes it all the more dreadful to deal with. From losing a wife to a cult murder, kidnappings gone wrong to solving a 40-year-old cold case, these celebrities have experienced their worst nightmares brought to life. Remember to subscribe to Rumour Juice and hit that notification bell so that you can be the first to know when we upload new content. Dylan McDermott. McDermott is famous for playing crime fighters on The Practice and Dark Blue. But the actor solved a real-life cold case with a tragic connection to himself. When McDermott was only 5 years old, his mother Diane died under mysterious circumstances. It was alleged that John Sponza, Diane's boyfriend at the time, was cleaning his gun and accidentally shot and killed her. McDermott had been locked outside the house, so all he heard was the fatal gunshot. He never forgot the sound of the weapon that took his mother's life away, and he never believed that it was just an accident. John was never charged, and at the time, police weren't able to find any evidence to rule Diane's death as a crime. The case was determined as unsolved. After more than 40 years since his mother's death, the actor finally convinced the police to reopen the cold case and re-examine the evidence. Soon, they found evidence that Sponza had murdered Diane. Sponza could not be put on trial since he had been murdered years earlier, but McDermott finally got the closure he had been longing for. "I've come to the point in my life where I'm able to begin to process all of this," he told police. He could rest easy knowing that his mother's murder was solved and the case was closed. Kelsey Grammer.
You got a sister, Fraser?
No.
You have a dress?
What's the occasion?
He made us laugh with his classic roles on Frasier and Cheers, but Kelsey Grammer's life story will bring you to tears. Both his father and his sister were murdered in two separate incidents just a few years apart. Born on the U.S. Virgin Islands, Grammer's parents divorced when he was a young boy, and he was raised by his grandparents. When Kelsey was in his early years, his father, then living with his second wife, was murdered by a stranger outside of his own home. Grammer's father, Frank, heard noises outside his house and went out to take a look. When he did, he found a man, later identified as Arthur B. Niles, setting fire to his car. Niles then shot Frank twice, killing him. Niles was later apprehended, but was found not guilty by reason of insanity. Only 5 years later, his 18-year-old sister Karen was abducted and murdered by a serial killer named Freddie Glenn. Grammer didn't even learn his sister's fate until a week after she went missing.
My granddad on my father's side, when I called and told him about Karen, he just said this family's cursed.
Karen's killer, Freddie, had two accomplices, and they were eventually captured. And Freddie was sentenced to death, which later changed to life in prison. The tragic deaths in Grammer's life didn't stop there. 5 years after his sister's murder, the actor's two half-brothers, Billy and Steven, died in a scuba accident when one failed to resurface, and the other died of an air embolism after going back down in order to look for him. I just got a big dose. For every story you hear that's tragic, there's another that's equally tragic or more so. I think you come to look at it as part of life. In spite of all the loss he's had to endure, Grammer is still hopeful about life, and he has even been able to forgive his sister's killer, Jennifer Hudson. Actress and singer Jennifer Hudson's career was just beginning. She was living the American dream, with a hugely successful debut album despite her loss on American Idol.
Know that whether you win or not, you still have the prize, which is your talent, and you can still make it.
She'd won an Oscar for her role in Dreamgirls. It seemed like things could only get better. Unfortunately, tragedy was waiting behind the wings of her soaring success. In 2008, Hudson received a phone call that brought her worst nightmare to life. Her mother and brother were found shot to death in their Chicago home, and her 7-year-old nephew was missing and presumed kidnapped. The singer's heart was in tatters, unable to believe what she was being told.
It literally just takes a part of you.
Who could have done something so heartless? Who would have taken the lives away from people that she loved? 3 days later, the lifeless body of her nephew had been found. It was later discovered that the estranged husband of Hudson's sister-in-law, William Balfour, had previously threatened to kill her family. After gathering enough evidence, police arrested Balfour. He was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. The singer took a hiatus from public appearances so that she could mourn the heartbreaking loss of her family. Hudson and her sister-in-law started the Hudson King Foundation for the families of slain victims, a charity to support the families of murder victims. She finally returned the following year for her incredibly emotional performances at the Grammys and the Super Bowl. Michael Jordan. Jordan, one of the world's greatest men to have ever played the game of basketball. People still talk about the amazing circumstances behind his team's rise to fame, and Jordan is a legend in his sport. Unfortunately, during the peak of his career, the basketball player suffered a loss that forced him to question everything in his life. In 1993, Michael's father, James Jordan, suddenly went missing and wasn't found until a month later. First, his car was abandoned, with no signs of what could have happened to him. Sadly, police soon found James' body in a swampy area. The shocking death of his father broke Michael's heart. Unable to process the loss of the man who had raised him, Michael retired from playing professional basketball 2 months later. Jordan then found out that his father had parked his car alongside a highway while traveling to take a nap. 2 men found him still asleep and intended to tie him up and steal the vehicle. Things went wrong, however, and one of the 2 shot his defenseless father, killing him instantly.
Would you want to ever say to them why?
No, because I don't want to know.
You don't?
No. Because it probably would hurt me even more just to know their reasons. Because if it is, it's going to be totally meaningless to the reason. And it's better that I don't know.
While the official story is that the incident was a carjacking gone wrong, there are numerous conspiracy theories about his father's murder, including that the killing was related to Michael Jordan's excessive gambling debts. Charlize Theron. Before Charlize Theron made a name for herself as an Oscar-winning actress and action star, she was a young girl growing up in South Africa. Young Charlize and her mother Gerda were abused by her alcoholic father, Charles Theron. In 1991, the domestic violence Charlize and her mother had to endure reached a breaking point. Charles drunkenly threatened his wife and daughter, waving around a loaded handgun. He fired several shots, but luckily missed both of them. Fearing for their lives, Gerda ran into another room and retrieved another handgun. She shot Charles and killed him, saving both their lives. Police ruled Charles's killing as self-defense, and no charges were ever filed against Gerda. Charlize, only 15 at the time, told people that her father had died in a car accident, so she didn't have to tell them the real story. Today, Charlize has become far more open to talking about it, saying, "I'm not ashamed to talk about it because I do think that the more we talk about these things, the more we realize we are not alone in any of it." Roman Polanski. Rosemary's Baby tells the story of an actor selling his soul to the devil in exchange for fame and fortune, sacrificing his beautiful wife and her unborn child as part of the bargain. It was director Roman Polanski's breakout film, which brought him a huge amount of success. At the time, Roman was married to the very famous actress Sharon Tate. Just a year later, tragedy came knocking in the form of cult leader Charles Manson and his family. Polanski's home was broken into by the infamous Charles Manson's family members. Roman was out of town on work, but his wife was home with 3 guests. Tate, who was pregnant at the time, was gruesomely murdered by one of Charles's people, along with everyone else in the house. While they were ransacking the home, one of them said, "I'm the devil and I'm here to do the devil's business." Fans couldn't help but notice the scary similarity from Sharon's tragic death to the plot of Rosemary's Baby, and wondered if perhaps the film had laid a curse on Polanski's family.
Everybody was saying, work, work, that's the best medicine. And I remember talking to Stanley Kubrick on the telephone, who was the only person who said, "I'm sure everybody tells you go to work." I said, "That's right." He says, "I know you can't work. Why don't you just go away? Do some sports or something, and there will be a moment where you feel like getting out of the room." Incredible, I remember that.
Sofia Vergara. Sofia Vergara brought to life one of the most beloved characters on Modern Family, and became one of the highest paid television actresses around. However, before she graced our screens as Gloria, the actress had already made a name for herself back in her home country, Colombia.
Put them down and walk away.
You know, Gloria.
Back in Colombia, Sofia's family had already been wealthy. So wealthy, in fact, that her older brother, Rafael, actually kept bodyguards around him at all times. The family's wealth made them a dangerous target for thieves. In 1998, before Sofia had made her big move to the US, Rafael decided to go without his bodyguards for just one day. Unfortunately, kidnappers seized the opportunity and tried to abduct him. The exact details on what happened are not entirely clear, but the attempt failed when one of the kidnappers shot and killed Rafael. Trying to heal from the horrific loss of her brother, Sofia came to Miami and brought her family with her so they could all get a fresh start. While her career soared and the actress became a household name, her younger brother went down the dark path of substance abuse, unable to deal with the loss of his older brother. After numerous drug-related arrests, Julio was deported back to Colombia. No one could ever imagine the pain that these celebrities and their families have had to go through when losing their loved ones to such horrific tragedies. Fans can only hope that they were able to heal from their losses. Their stories have made others who have lost family members know that they are not alone. With time, the wounds eventually heal, but their loved ones will never be forgotten.